She playing. Stay. Good girl. All right, so we're going to continue. I'm thinking we're just going to continue with the same 5.5 pounds of clay and do some more bowls, and I'm going to show you some other options with texturing. This is a white stoneware I'm using, so I would probably stain the textured area or use a glaze like Pen Spa. That would do really well on top of a texture. If I were to wood fire these, I would definitely put wax and iron oxide over part of the textured area and then glaze. If they were brown stoneware, B-mixed Helmar clay, number 41 from Sheffield, R900, I would do nothing to them. Those clays turn quite dark and toasty in the wood kiln. So there's a lot of options. Basically, I'm just showing you right now technique, throwing technique and options in your technique. So we're going to go right back to where we were in the previous videos. I've done the conical wedging on this piece. So these pieces are already in a conical form. It makes it a million times easier to throw versus if they're pounded in a ball with all sorts of nooks and crannies that make your hands vibrate. Those vibrations and bouncing of the hands are what creates spirals when you're coning up and coning down. So I do this pretty. Okay, coning up, I do exactly what I did in the other videos to alleviate the soreness in my wrist. And I'm taking my left hand at 5 o'clock, I'm compressing away from me. And with the right hand, this is the hand that I'm having problems, a little arthritis in my wrist. I'm going to pull and then pull up gently. That's all I really need to do to cone up a piece this large. We're going to cone down. I use the bulbous muscle of the left hand on top with the elbow tucked. The contact point is over here at 7 o'clock facing me. Don't let the hand slide over. Don't let the elbow come over here and slide over. Lock the elbow into your rib cage, and this is your action of coning down. As I'm coning down, the right hand, right thumb is wrapped around behind the left. That's my hand position. For those of you who can look from the right-handed camera, that's my hand position. Top of the mold, side of the mold. Now, as I get it close to the wheel head, here's that bulge. Below that bulge, the clay is not on center. So we need to take our finger and sponge and press that clay forward and inward into that void. Now that's completely filled and completely on center. If you forget to do that, when you pull the clay up, the foundation of your pot, there's going to be a 1/2 inch to 1/4 of an inch, even though it's maybe only 1/8 of an inch now. When you pull up, you're going to make it larger. That area is not on center, and that will be doing the hula hoop wobbly wobbly thing on you. So you want to make sure to get that lower shoulder compressed inward and on center. Cosmetic centering, I'm using a sponge in the right fist, just compressing down. The left hand is compressing in. We're completely on center. I'm going to open this with using the index finger and middle finger of the right hand, like this. The middle finger and index finger of the left hand is on top. I'm going to be pushing my fingers down in a very passive manner versus opening like this is much, much more aggressive. When you open like this and then curl your fingers and pull, there is a tendency to pull the interior wall off center. But if it's at a very soft angle, you have less chance of doing that. One thing you can't forget is you absolutely need lubrication. So notice the interior curvature. That's what I'm looking for. Now, just to reiterate, we talked about this in another video, is whenever you have established some idiosyncrasies, things that are irregular, things that you're curious about, it, what's that going to do to my pot? See the rim sticking out in this ridge halfway down the median? Compress those in, lift that wall up slightly, and make your exterior wall uniform. Get rid of any of the idiosyncrasies that your last hand position may have created at this stage while you're pulling up. You may find at times those idiosyncrasies leaving ridges and waffles and waves, and your pot is exactly what you want. But at this stage, when we're trying to keep the pot completely on center and pulling it up, we want to eradicate any inconsistencies at this point. Now I'm going to take my sponge with a lot of water, and I'm just going to rock my hand back and forth across the bottom, compressing it down and keeping the integrity of the curved interior shoulder. This allows us to have more of a curved or round bottom bowl. That's all we have to do. Compress the rim. Now we pull up. I like to use the sponge on my fingertips on the right hand. The left thumb is going to come down and connect the right thumb. Notice the indentation I've just created on the lower shoulder. I'm going to grab that clay from that indentation and I'm going to lift. As I pull up, I have to lighten up my pressure. You can't use the same volume of pressure here that you do here. Down here, the water density is much denser. Therefore, the clay is resisting you quite a bit more. Compressing the rim, go back down to the lower shoulder, push in, see the big indentation, pull that clay up. Good, that's it. Now I see a few little ridges on the exterior wall. I'm going to take my rib and I'm just going to apply my rib at 3 o'clock at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to compress the clay from the interior towards the exterior, compressing the exterior wall with the rib, and it trims off all the moist clay. And it also takes the random clay platelets and it makes them tighter and aligned. Therefore, there's more friction between the clay platelets. Even though it's a pretty wet piece, it creates more structural integrity in your exterior wall. That's really important when you do really exaggerated forms. Those of you who might work in pretty exaggerated globe and pillow forms, and having a wall that's been thoroughly compressed is really imperative when you're ribbing way out and stretching. So we're looking pretty good for this cylindrical form. Now we're going to, what are we going to do? We're going to texture the exterior. So this is a Japanese clay comb. Sheffield Pottery sells them in kits of 3. I use them a lot. I really like the texture I get from them. I'm going to support my rim, take the clay comb down here at 3 o'clock, and while the pot is spinning slow motion, I lift the comb up to the rim. I push in pretty firmly. One of the things I really like in my own work is that I like to add a little bit of mystery, making texture, a finish that might make the observer, the appreciator, wonder if, is that clay, is that wood, is it stone? Because your clay texture aesthetically is aligned with another material. It might look more like bark of a tree. It might look like texture carved into wood. It might look like stone, depending on what your finished firing technique is. So that's all going at a slight diagonal. It knocks my rim off. Go back and compress your rim. Get your rim back on center to your best ability. There we go. Now we're going to take the rib. I'm going to take the thumb of the left hand and middle finger of the left hand, stabilize the rib. The index finger of the left hand, oh, this one, sticks out a little bit and attaches to the right hand. The ribs contact point is at about 45 degrees, passively. There are people I've seen and had teach here at the Kent Clay Works in the past whose ribbing hand positions are in an aggressive contact point. I tend to have all my hand positions over here with the downstream flow of the pot where they're slightly less aggressive. They're a little more passive. It doesn't mean that it's a better way to go. It just means that's the way I do it, and it really works for me. But I have had friends who rib way over here at 11 o'clock very aggressively. It's totally different technique than what I do. And those people are great potters. They make really nice pots. All right. So I really like my interior curvature, but knowing I have 5.5, I can afford to move this. And again, I reiterate that in the other videos, in this interior curvatured wall of the bowl, if you look at your bird's eye view from above, and you can double click on that on your screen, I'm going to put a registration mark right there. That's your interior shoulder. My fingertips are where that shoulder is on the outside. That clay is 4 times as thick as your rim. It has not been moved. Therefore, it is firmer, it has much more resistant, and you have to be very cognitive about holding your rib firmly, but sensitively as you pass through that shoulder, because you need to push that clay and that shoulder outward. And everything on this ribbing gradually down is creating a taper. We are not ribbing the interior shoulder out on a horizontal plane. If you end up doing that by mistake, this plane where my fingers are, the clay will collapse because there is not a significant amount of clay underneath that exaggerated shoulder to hold it in place. So the taper is what you want. The interior happy to yummy. That's a food term. I relate all my pots to food. Okay, I'm going to indent the rim with my index finger because I like what the glaze does on that. Let's try something completely different. Let's texture the rim. Now, you never want to texture the rim like this on a drinking vessel because you'll never sell more than one. People don't like texture onto their lips. But in terms of a glazed functional bowl, if I used iron oxide or another stain mixed with wax on this rim, it will look really cool. It'll be so contrary that there'll be a little bit of a mystery to it. So I'm just going to go with my sponge and my fingers in slow motion and just hold them in a rigid spot just below the rim to get the clay just below the rim back on center. Because when you do all that compression onto a rim, you tend to knock the rim off. Now, one thing I want to look at is exterior rim. Fingers at contact. It's smooth. That's a little odd. Texture, small band of smooth. So we're just going to go like this the whole way around. And sometimes what happens with pots like this is you add so much confusion because it's a functional form It's a bowl. It's clearly meant to eat out of, but people do not relate rough texture on the rim and the exterior wall to something you would eat out of. And when I sell them in shows and all, people say, would you eat out of that? And the answer is absolutely. What I'm trying to do is to create a functional pot that has a bit of an artistic leaning, a statement about texture and contrast. I won't glaze the top or the exterior at all. I'll just glaze the interior. Being a white stoneware, I would put a pigment like an iron oxide or a manganese dioxide in wax and stain the textured area. So that's pretty much this piece. We're going to take a slight pause or slight break, and we're going to move on to another one. Yeah, I'm happy with that. It's going to be a fun final piece. Okay, here we're back. Now we're going to do another bowl, same clay. Same, we're probably do the similar shape. I'm going to use a different tool to show you how to do texture or undulation. We'll decide when we get there. Notice Lonnie has gone. The attention period of a young dog is really short. She lasted a couple minutes. Okay. Okay, same hand position, pushing across the wheelhead against the conical form with my left hand. So 90% of my aggression is with the left hand. And I'm pulling in slightly with the right. I am hooking the baby finger in a little bit to create this ridge that I can grab and really simply pull vertically. That's as much as I need to cone up on this clay. If it was a lot firmer, I might cone up a little higher, because coning up also is almost a wedging technique. It softens it. Clay is fixotropic, meaning in movement or vibration. It has molecular expansion. It becomes softer. Really soft clay, you may not even want to cone up or cone down. You may just want to go to your centering positions of cosmetic centering, or the right hand on the left hand on top, right hand here, just throw the piece right to center. A lot of porcelain artists don't cone up and down because they don't want to soften the water density. They want their clay to stay drier. Cosmetic centering, right hand on top of the sponge. We're looking good. We're going to go to the option of opening with the double thumb, which is an adaptation of what I used to call the double-headed bird for coning up. So when you do the double-headed bird for coning up, you cone up like that, you can cone back down with your thumbs and then open. So you can actually do this in this motion. And you can cone up, cone down, and open in a very fluid motion without really changing your hand position. I'm pulling the piece open a little more. Still rounded in. Okay, so now we rock the sponge back and forth with our fingertips, compressing the bottom and rounding that interior shoulder. Feels good. Now we can bring the wall in slightly. It does knock your rim off. Whenever you go out from here in, it knocks your rim off. In this case now, all we have to do is go back and compress the rim. It looks a little thick. Let's get all the schmutz out of it. Yeah, we're going to go down a little more. It's a little thick. There we go. Okay, compress the rim. Clean your hands. Okay, let's get all that thick slurry out of the bowl. All right, great. Just like I did last time, I created this outward gouge or ridge. I have a rim here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make the exterior wall uniform with no idiosyncrasies. Make it smooth, ready to go, just like that. Compress the rim. Now we're going to pull up. Now in this piece, I'm going to create an undulation, a meandering with a tool deep inside the wall. That meandering and undulation in the exterior wall gets extremely exaggerated when you rib out. So I'm going to go for a very strict cylindrical form. That's this, I'm going to cut a line here for you to see. Below that line, you can see the clay flanging out in sort of a triangular area. That's a lot of thickness. So I lubricate that significantly, and I go in at the wheel head with my fingertips in this sponge, and I make that deep groove. That groove is where I grab the clay that's in that lower shoulder and I pull it up. That gives me slightly more height and more even wall thickness. I'm going to compress the exterior wall, straight up and down rib at 3 o'clock at a 45-degree angle, compressing the clay outward into the rib that I'm pushing in gently. Compresses and strengthens the wall and strips the wet clay off that wall. Clean the rim up. Okay, looking good. Now, this is a really fun technique that you need to experiment with. It doesn't, it's not always going to work the first time. So I'm just going to take a rod, a dowel, that is a tool, and I'm going to put pressure on the inside rim. I'm going to push my dowel firmly into the wet clay and just do these pulses of meanderings. And when I get further down the wall gets thicker, and you might want to push in a little more. It is altering the wall. So your wall is going to be knocked off center. Now, to make ribbing a little easier, let's just go back and get the rim back on center. Now, when you go to rib this out, this undulation or wavelengths that it's going to look like in the sea or in the lake, they are going to get a lot softer than this because we're stretching this texture and undulation, we're stretching it outward. As it stretches outward, it becomes more subtle. When we go to rib on the interior wall, the rib's going to be bouncing because we've altered the wall. The wall is not completely symmetrical on the inside. So as you rib, it's going to go boom, 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 boom. And what all you need to do is in your mind's eye, cognitively ignore that. Don't let that make you nervous or anxious. Oh, what's going on? That's going to be part of the technique because you altered the wall. And we're ribbing an altered wall out. This is a wonderful technique on goblets or tumblers. Okay, this bowl still has a real cylindrical shape to it, and it's holding its texture really nicely. I'm not really that fond of pieces to use for food service. I have to stick my whole forearm in. So we're going to rib it out. So it's shallower and more wider circumference, shallower. The other thing I like about these really open bowl forms is they are just delicious to glaze. You can have so much fun glazing these interiors. There was a woman here years ago, her name was Michelle, and she would put 10 different glazes, and she would dribble glazes from the rim on top of each other, and she would just get this myriad of color and variants on her pieces that were really, it was really fun and exciting. So there's an awful lot you can do with glazing on this open form. And that's something we're going to get in as we develop this Zoom video program. We'll discuss some of those aspects of shape and form and what do you really see in your shape and your form. So if we were to rib this out significantly more, like the other bowls I did, what would happen? The exterior wall would be cast in a shadow and you would not see this. So if we leave this bowl with more of a verticality in this upper 2/3, we're going to see it more. So we're going to preserve the sight lines. I might just see if I can bring it out just a wee bit because I tend to push things to their limit. But if you do this whole texture and you have a really wide open bowl that's a lot shallower than this, what I'm getting at is the more this comes out, the more you don't see the exterior. And this is a pretty cool exterior that has a lot of mystique to it. I'm going to round the rim, compress downward. I'm folding the sponge over the rim. Always compress your rims. I don't think in food service ware you really want to rim any thinner than this. They look beautiful, and there's incredible amounts of beautiful Asian serviceware that have really delicate rims, and a lot of that happens to be special serviceware, ritual wear, not daily use, special occasion. If you're making wares for everyday use, you really want to rim at least this thick or thicker so that they're not breaking when you wash them, put them in the dishwasher. We'll wire it off, we'll hold it up, and then that will be it for this demo. And now there's texture and ridges, and when it's firmer, like leather hard, those can be softened a little bit so you don't have sharp edges with glaze on them. But there's some pretty nice meandering oceanic, I guess you would call it. And then you can see where my fingers were on the rim. Now we have a very symmetrical rim. So that's it for this demo. We'll see you at the next one.